Demeter, not now. All right, there we go. I think we are live. And hello to everyone. I am still recovering from microphone audio issues. If I don't sound good, I apologize. But here we are. Welcome to Coffee, Kegs, and Kriegsspiel. I have some cool stuff to share with you. And as you can tell, we have on the board, well, dolls, as I call them, dolls, or as most people call them, miniatures. And we're going to talk about this because, yes, I played Kriegsspiel with miniatures yesterday, and worst of all, it was my idea to give it a try. We're going to talk about how that went down. Basically, it was the first time I played it with miniatures, and we played it kind of according to our standards. I have played Kriegsspiel with miniatures once before, but it actually wasn't Kriegsspiel. It was, I think it was Snappy Nappy or something, so it was actually designed to be played with miniatures. That worked pretty well a long time ago when I played that. This is the first time we actually did it with minis, so I'm going to talk about that momentarily. Real quick, I want you folks to know a few other quick things. First of all, we've got a store. Our store is working. It's etsy.com/shop/Kriegs Depot. And you come here, you can get some of our merchandise, and we have some cool little stuff here, including the Kriegsspiel rules, which you can purchase here on Etsy. But you can also purchase them from me directly for a few dollars less. There's a little upcharge here because Etsy likes to take a big old chunk out of everything. This year helps us to break even. So that's why that's on there. But yes, we do have the official rules available, and you can buy the K22 rule set and run your own games. So that's out there. And also, I want to invite everyone to support us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Kriegsspiel. Anybody who subscribes as a patron gets the rules for free. So there you go. You get free access to the rules. All right. Now let's talk about playing with dolls. All right. And thank you, Achilles, for the letting me know we have good audio. And yes, good morning. Thank you, everyone, who helped me this morning with the audio issues. All right, let's talk about this. First of all, just a little bit of backstory here. Um, Kriegsspiel is normally played with blocks, and in fact, I don't know. Do we have the blocks on here? We don't. This was a purpose-made module. We don't have the blocks, but everybody knows what Kriegsspiel blocks look like. I don't think I need to drop a bunch of Kriegsspiel blocks on the board to illustrate. But Kriegsspiel is traditionally played with blocks, and there's a variety of reasons for it, and I'm not going to get into that. Nonetheless, people like to play miniatures. And miniature wargaming goes back pretty far. In fact, it probably goes back at least as far as Kriegsspiel, probably even further back. People playing with miniature tin soldiers, wooden soldiers, and things like that. And I know H.G. Wells, when he did Little Wars, I believe that was a miniatures system that he used. And is that what it's called, or is that the name of the show? But anyway, H.G. Wells played with miniatures as well, as I believe. And you know, there's some natural overlap between Kriegsspiel and miniatures. Obviously, you're trying to fight a Napoleonic or American Civil War or Revolutionary War type battle kind of a thing. And instead of blocks, you're using miniatures. And miniatures are kind of cool because, well, they're pretty. They look nice. They represent, soldiers. They're less abstract than a block may be. Now, I did an episode a few weeks ago where I talked about the difference between miniatures and blocks. And I talked about my fake rivalry with miniatures players, how I referred to people who play with miniatures as people who play with dolls. It's make-believe. It's completely made up. It's like the accounts receivable department having a legitimate beef with the accounts payable department, going to war with each other, No, it's just completely made up. There's really no difference in terms of dignity, shall I say, or anything like that. Absolutely. If you like to play with miniatures, have fun with miniatures. It's okay. But in Kriegsspiel, again, the game is customarily played with blocks. And when you play with miniatures, there are some challenges. And like I said, I did an episode a few weeks ago where I talked about all of those challenges. So you can look that up. But rather than recap that, I'm going to talk to you about how this game went and kind of give you my conclusions on the whole matter. All right, a real quick recap of the game. So basically, we borrowed some miniatures from, it looked like an American Revolutionary War playset. We imported them here, and we came up with. I'm sorry, my dog's going crazy as she typically does. Um, let's see here. We came up with a general idea, and the general idea was there is this castle here, or this fortified position here, and one side had to hold the position. I believe that was blue, actually. I should be drawing this in blue, shouldn't I be? Blue had to hold this position. That was their job, to hold this position. And they did so by deploying some cavalry forward here, and deploying some infantry here, and deploying the reserves here, and the rest of their forces more or less around here. And Red's job then was to basically take that position, which they elected to do by making a flanking attack here, and then the main attack up here. All right, 1 second. All right, so let's see here. There's so much noise in the background, but we're getting it solved. There we are. All right. Um, so here was the red plan of attack. Red was coming in on 3 different avenues, and here they had a particularly good run, smashing into blue and driving blue back. Even though blue sent reinforcements from the center. Where's my blue pin? And let's see here. Blue sent reinforcements this way, and they eventually came this way. Red came down under the command of the infamous Lord Hugs, and basically smashed this unit, forced them to retreat, and then this unit came around and was basically enveloped by red forces, which were now here in this area, and they were able to basically destroy in detail the 2 blue brigades that came to attack. So that allowed red then to continue their advance. Over here on the right, there was a lot of fighting, especially towards the end of the battle. The battle actually kicked off here in the north with red cavalry and blue cavalry clashing, and I think red cavalry kind of pushed through the blue cavalry. They both, no, actually they didn't. They kind of bounced off each other, as I recall, and then the red cavalry fell back, the blue cavalry fell back, the infantry took over the advance and was then able to push ahead. The red infantry assault on this flank also overwhelmed the defenses here, and basically blue was more or less overrun. Even though they had reinforcements coming up from this direction here, it was not enough to save the day. A timely red cavalry attack on the right flank made all of the difference, I feel, and that basically helped to carry the position for red. So blue was forced from the position, the castle was taken, and red won the day, and that's how the battle wrapped up. You can see the live stream of that battle. It was recorded and is played back on YouTube, and so it's called the mini battle in Meckel or something like that. And you can find that again on our YouTube and watch the whole battle if you want. I would fast forward through the first hour because, like most of our game recordings, the first hour is usually the setup phase. Maybe we need to stop recording those, but I like to record those so you guys can see all the work that goes into getting set up and getting organized, and then you have that experience when you set up your own games. Either way, let's talk about the miniatures aspect. One of the problems, or one of the concerns that I had, was that the miniatures were going to be too fiddly. that there's going to be too many little things going on, and that they get messed up, and we'd have to sort this mess out. Actually, it's pretty easy. You pick it up, you hit floor 4 in Tabletop Simulator. You hit a little button basically, and you can reconfigure everything, and it just sets it all right back up. So actually, it's pretty cool. The other thing that was really cool was that these units could then be rearranged into different formations, something we can't easily do with blocks. So when Lord Hugs came down against blue, he had a line there. And let me see if I have some blue infantry here. And I'll show you, we had a line here. And the two lines basically faced off and fought against each other. And as losses were rolled, we simply took units off this back rank. Really, the losses are being incurred in the front. But, when a loss comes off in the front, the rear rank fills it in, right? So that's basically what we were simulating when we did that. So you could see by looking in the rear rank where your losses were, and we were just kind of pulling them off in random locations. We weren't particularly peeling them off from specific spots, so I don't want to give anyone that impression. But we would, take them from the ends, take one or two from the middle, whatever. And in that way, you kind of had this graphical representation of the losses as they were accrued. Another thing that we did, and in particular with the cavalry, when the cavalry was in action, let's see if I can find the cavalry. Here it is. The pieces look skewed, by the way. You see how they look really, really thin, like these guys haven't eaten in a long time, right? The reason we did that was because we had to scale the pieces to the front. So 6 pieces side by side was intended to represent 250 yards, or paces, I mean, which is the frontage of a unit in traditional Kriegsspiel of a full battalion. So that's a battalion right there. But anyway, in terms of frontage, so that's why the pieces are so slim the way they are, because we actually had to really shrink them down to get the frontage correct, and we really wanted to have that frontage. Otherwise, it would have looked really awkward on the map. It wouldn't have been scaled correctly. In any case, with the cavalry, what was really cool is we could depict that the cavalry was disrupted by simply, moving pieces all over like this. I don't know why it does the little arrow thing. I'm not pointing anything out in particular with the arrow. But you see, we could do this with the formation, and that tells anybody at a glance this cavalry formation is disrupted. And then, of course, the direction it's facing. It worked really, really well. So you might have this situation. In fact, we did have this situation where over here we had this cavalry was disrupted here, and they were back here reforming, and this cavalry was over here, and it was disrupted. And it looked good. It worked really, really well. It was a good way to play this out. And you could tell at a glance what you needed to see. What you can't see, and what we do depict on our blocks, maybe I'll spawn in a block if I can find my K22 module real quick. There it was. I'll spawn in a couple infantry blocks. Let me see here. Here we go. We'll just take the red infantry. Okay. And if you flip this block over, we have it scripted so that we have a column, and now you can see that we have a marching column going on. Here, we were able to do kind of the same thing. Let me just take these pieces here, and the way we were able to do it is you rotate the pieces 90 degrees like that, and look at that, now they're in a marching column. See there? So it worked really, really well. Now, I think overall it was a big success. It worked really well. I would be interested in playing with it again and experimenting with additional use of miniatures. There were a lot of fiddly bits, even though you could kind of pick things up and drag things around. There were moments when we had to kind of sort pieces. Like I said, remember when these were all flipped over and I had to, set things back up and flip them over? But that wasn't that big a deal, you know? See how it's fiddly? But that wasn't that big of a deal. We were able to manage. Um, I was going to say something else. Oh yeah, we had thought about using the artillery, Fletcher Pratt style, and this was my idea. And you might not know what Fletcher Pratt is. I'll tell you. If you are into naval wargaming, there is a naval wargaming system called Fletcher Pratt. And in Fletcher Pratt, you basically determine, what are you firing at? You set your angle to the target from one ship to another, and then you calculate the range, and you get the range in centimeters or whatever to an umpire. Who then takes a tape measure and measures across the floor and determines, where your shells land, if they hit the ship or if they splash next to it or whatever. That's Fletcher Pratt. We had thought about or I had thought about doing the same thing with artillery. Now, not so much worrying about the angle because it's kind of hard to miss when you're shooting at a big row of troops here like this. But the range, have the players kind of estimate the range and tell me how far away do you want to shoot. Now, the thing is there is a measuring tool here in let's see here. There we go, so that you can basically cheat. So it wasn't entirely practical, but having players give us a range for artillery would have added a fun dimension to the player who was running the artillery. That would have been kind of cool. I'm still kind of wondering if there's a way to either disable that feature for the players or to scale things differently. I don't know. Because the player module and the umpire module does not have to be identical, but then they have to convert. But that would be kind of a cool thing, is to tell the player, okay, you're in command of this battery. You see the enemy unit out there. You have to guess the range and then turn in a range, and then you'll be told if your shells land short or overshoot or what. If they land short but close, they'll still hit targets. But if you overshoot, you miss, and if you land too short, you miss. And then you can adjust your fire on the next turn. And that would be kind of interesting to play with. And that doesn't necessarily require the use of miniatures. You can do that with blocks too. It's just figuring out the mechanics of how we want to do that. How are we going to make them turn in those orders and make that work? But that's solvable. Um, let's see. Justin says just change the grid size. The grid size for the player module very doable, which we could do, but again, they're still going to have that measuring tool. But maybe, again, I have a hunch that might actually work, because if umpires and players have two different scales going on, that might work pretty darn well. Um, Achilles says the briefing at the beginning is very useful, at least for me, when I'm watching the games. Okay, great. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so that's important that we include the briefing. It's just the whole setup thing. But the thing is, yes, you have to give the briefing so that the players can set up everything the way they need to according to their plan, which is why another reason why all of that stuff is kind of recorded. And that first hour is just us going back and forth and getting the players kind of lined up and marching in a row. You would think this should be a really simple thing to do, especially with veteran players, which is sit down, get your command, get your briefing, sort yourself out, and start playing. Like you could do that in 10 or 15 minutes. But it's actually crazy complicated. There's a lot of different things that have to be done. And it's really hard to do all of that as homework and front load it. It is a lot of stuff because we don't know who exactly is going to show up. That we have to do on the day of. So it's kind of hard. I've tried really hard to minimize that black hour, if you will, where we're just running around like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to get the players pointed in the right direction and marching down the road. And I haven't been very successful at that. I want people to take a lesson from that, of course. When you run or play Kriegsspiel and you say, okay, I want this formation to move here and attack this and do that. As umpires, we've been very kind to players, and we've allowed their orders to be implemented either instantly or on the very next turn, which is usually like a 5, 10, or 15-minute turn cycle. But basically on the very next turn, and then the men obey perfectly. Let me tell you something. It's more like herding cats who are really reluctant to go the direction you want them to go, and it's not natural for people to want to go into battle and fight. Um, and in reality, I have a pretty powerful hunch that, giving an order to take, anything bigger than a brigade, or even a brigade, take a brigade and say, point him in this direction and go at the enemy and fight. That takes a lot longer to sort out and get people doing what they are supposed to be doing than what we depict in our games. In our games, it seems like it's more like a video game and that you give the command and it's instant. I really do want to experiment in the future with bigger delays for order implementation. Okay, you gave the order, but the brigade commander has to get the troops sorted out. Again, has to get them pointed in the right direction and marching towards the objective. Again, if it's hard enough for us to do this on a computer when it's something that we've drilled every open Saturday, imagine what it must be in real life with real live ammunition and people who just don't want to do that, being compelled to do that. So it's just a food for thought for the future. Um, Robert says, what? Kriegsspiel Fletcher Pratt? Yes, Fletcher Pratt, naval wargaming system. It's a naval miniature system, basically, but it's used for training. And again, it works really well, and it would be interesting to see if we could adapt a little bit of that to our artillery play, so that if we play at this detachment level Kriegsspiel, which is what we're basically doing here, where you have a couple brigades or so bouncing off each other, and you have somebody who's just running the artillery battery. It'd be interesting to give that person who's running the artillery battery that job to do. It'd be kind of fun. I kind of enjoyed playing at this scale, or actually umpiring it. I would like to play at it. A lot of times when we play Kriegsspiels, we run at this brigade to division level where the players command infantry and they command a battery or two, or they command a couple squadrons of cavalry. In fact, a lot of games we've done what I think is frankly a sin, which is where we have players with cavalry, infantry, and artillery all under their command. And I understand why we do that, but I actually don't like that because then they can't command all these different elements properly. And so they send the cavalry off in an adventure. The infantry's doing something. The artillery's kind of dragged along at the very back end of the column, which is one of the worst places you can have it, especially if you expect contact with the enemy. And it just turns into this mess, and people never learn. In the K-22 system, you're either a cavalry commander and you can bring horse artillery, or you're an infantry commander and you can bring foot artillery, but you cannot bring a blend of both. It's one or the other. And that's kind of my way of trying to corral the players and get them to kind of specialize. At this level that we played at, we took it even another step further, so that a cavalry commander actually only has this. This is it. This is all you have. This is your entire command. And if you're commanding infantry, you can break off a skirmish company. We allowed use of a skirmish company or whatever. But otherwise, this is it. This is your command. This is your infantry command. This is your battery, or this is your cavalry, and that's what you command. And you have to make better choices, because if you make a mistake, you're out of your game really, really quick. So it changes the way I think you have to think and approach your Kriegsspiel problems. And yeah, I think it makes you play a little bit more seriously. I hope. I'm tired of these engagements where everybody kind of walks up and just pushes everything into the middle. It's like playing poker with people who go all in every hand. It's very annoying. And eventually the people who are going all in every hand, they lose. Because, you hit somebody who actually has something in the hole and they're going to just clean your clock. But, it's the same thing in Kriegsspiel. And getting people to play with a little bit more finesse and a little bit more care and concern, and getting them to really think about shepherding their unit, building in some more delays so they have to think further ahead. And then I think using the miniatures again. I kind of want to try this again, because the miniatures do provide a level of detail and interaction that you can't get with the blocks. So I think some of these things, blending them together, playing at this smaller detachment level, I think that's going to catch on in the group. I think we'll see some more games like this. I think we'll see more games with these miniatures, and I think it will be very interesting. If there was one big problem that I ran into here, it's finding the map, getting the map scaled. When we look at our maps, some of our maps are quite large. This is probably going to be a disaster for the pieces, but yeah, you look at this here, you know, the scale is completely different. And getting these pieces scaled to the map, it's going to be a real challenge. I think the map is too small. This isn't the K22 module where the map would be bigger. Let's load up that module real quick. Let's see here. Where did I put it? There it is. It doesn't load very quick. But let's load that up. But if we take and drop some miniatures on here, let's just kind of see what the scale looks like. But I don't think it's that great. So objects, and we'll go to our saved objects, and we'll go. Did I name them miniatures? There we go. Well, if they want to load. There we go. And here we are. I don't think that's horrible. I think they're upside down. No, they're not. Oh, these are really tiny. I don't know. It's loading. It's loading is what it is. I'm not going to mess with it, but it might work. It might work. But yeah, finding a map where the miniatures and the map, everything is scaled correctly. Let me see. Do I have a ruler here? Yep. Let's check the scale. Maybe I was wrong about this. Maybe this map would work for it. But yeah, we went with the Mecco map for a variety of reasons. I like the Mecco map. I know Alex likes the Mecco map. And nope, they're not scaled. They're too big. So yeah, we'd have to shrink them down. So yeah, we would have to play with the scale. I thought we would have to, and but that doesn't mean it's impossible. It can be done. So it is absolutely possible. So there you have it. One other thing I'm going to show you because it's about time to wrap up. Actually, before I do that, let's take a few questions. Um, let's see here. That's why they used flags and bugles to give orders. Yes. Okay. Combined arms commands in Napoleonic should be corps level or higher. Divisions were one or the other with maybe artillery support. So yes, that makes sense. Except for certain unique units, Achilles says. Justin says historical OOBs may vary. Achilles, I can cite half a dozen mixed brigades and divisions. Yes. Achilles says yes, agreed. So it depends on what type of force is being depicted. So I'll say for us, we really are still kind of, even though we've been doing Open Saturday for over a year now, I think, maybe not quite, but for a long time, we are still getting players used to just commanding those one elements. Like really, I I'm all about learning how to command something really, really well. Like if you're going to run cavalry, learn to run cavalry really, really well. The infantry detachment would more or less be a distraction until you learn how to steward and shepherd and care for your cavalry so that you're not just all going all in with an all out charge and now your horses are blown and you're done for the day. How do you use cavalry to kind of parry the enemy, forays and advances and stuff? How do you defend the flanks? What do you do? Do you scout with them? All these things that cavalry do, learn to do that really well, and then we can think about adding a battery of guns for you, which I don't have a problem with that. That's part of cavalry operations, horse artillery, or maybe a detachment of infantry to help or do some other mission. But really, let's learn how to do one thing well. Let's learn how to run that artillery really well and get the artillery game down before we start saying, you know what, now let's ratchet up to division command. Let's ratchet up to corps command. Let's start running armies. Because they're quite different. And I think there's a lot of fun to be had at these smaller scales. Of course, that doesn't mean you can't play at the bigger scales if you want to, but I would like to get away from, you have a brigade and it's got cavalry, artillery, and infantry, and everybody's a cookie cutter formation of the same stuff. and everybody pushes everything to the middle. What a great time we had. Now we go home. I don't think we have too many games like that anymore. Our scenario designers and our umpires are more savvy than that. Early on, I think we kind of had that issue, but we were still trying to get our sea legs, if you will. But yeah, I kind of liked the way that we played yesterday. I found it to be very rewarding, and I found it to be very practical. I feel that the advantages of using the miniatures kind of outweighed the disadvantages of using them, and I would like to try it again. So that's my bottom line. One more thing that I want to share with you, actually, it's here in the games module, is Kriegsspiel pieces. And we are working on a set of standard Kriegsspiel pieces, and this is a prototype set. This is not the final. In fact, we've made changes from all of this. But we are going to make physical printed Kriegsspiel pieces. You'll be able to customize some colors and a few other options here or there. But these are in the works, and I'm hoping that sometime in the next few weeks we have these available for printing, and you'll be able to order physical copies of the pieces. So that's coming soon. Anyway, I think I could go on. Like I have a lot to say about this, but I'll just say it was a good experience. I'd like to try it again, and let's see where we end up. I like that little detachment level with the miniatures. I think it worked really well. At a bigger level, I don't think you can use the miniatures. You're back to the blocks. But at that little detachment level Kriegspiel, I absolutely positively think yes, you can use the miniatures, and it can be a lot of fun if each person runs their one command and they have to use teamwork to coordinate, which is real life. Well, there you have it, folks. That's what we have. I want to thank everybody who tuned in, Robert, Justin, and Achilles who participated in the conversation. I want to thank Tack who helped me with the audio check as well as Achilles prior to today's episode. I know we had some technical difficulties and got off to a couple minutes late start, but here we are. I want to thank you all for being here, and hey, we will see you on the next adventure. Thanks for now.